à la réunion numéro 59 du.
This is the 59th meeting of the Public Accounts Committee of the House of Commons. So we're meeting today to discuss business of the committee.
COVID-19 vaccine contract. PSPC produced the contracts of the committee unredacted as per the motion adopted on Thursday, April 20th, 2023. I know some of you have already had an opportunity to go in and begin your review. Just a couple of notes here. The committee received from Public Service and Procurement Canada all the contracts on Thursday, April 20th, 2023, as ordered by the motion on March 23rd, 2023. There was a little delay, but it was, I think, in good faith to get the documents translated and to us in an orderly fashion. And I will say the department did work with myself and the clerk just to update us on timelines. So I appreciate the department's work in this to produce those documents in a timely manner. PSPC sent a correspondence signed by Lorenzo Arasi, Assistant Deputy Minister of Policy, Planning and Communications, on behalf of Public Service and Procurement Canada to the committee on Thursday, April 20th. This correspondence was distributed to the members earlier today. And as decided by the committee, the said contracts will be made available to members only under the supervision of the clerk. I'm just going to kind of remark on a few things this morning. So before you go in, I'm going to ask members, urge members, tell members to surrender your phones and any electronic devices outside the room as per any kind of budget lockup. So there's no problems with that. This is for your safety as well as to ensure we are in compliance with the motion. Going forward, so and as you know, in the room, you'll have access to all 7 contracts in addition to amendments that were made to said contracts. You're permitted to mark them up and take notes while you're in that room. Those notes should remain behind. You'll have access to them when we have our in-camera meeting on May the 1st. Going forward as well, either the clerk or another member of his team is going to be in the room as well. If you can, if you've got winter coats, things like that, there's hangers outside. But in the room, you kind of limit your personal belongings as much as possible. You can have them there, except please do turn over electronic devices. I think it went well today, clerk, and the clerk's available from, is it 8 to 8 every day? But I would urge you to set a time with him if you're able to do that. It just makes it a little easier. But of course, you're not required to. It seems that somehow he's available here. An assistant is available almost around the clock. So I think that's it. I just ask, members, we're all honorable members here, and we know the motion that we passed. But these are just I'm just reminding you of these just to ensure there are no errors that could happen. I'm now going to turn things over to Mr. Desjardins, who has a motion. But before I do that, I do want to just highlight a letter that I think you've all received now. Is that right, clerk? They've all received it from the Auditor General this morning in response to both Mr. Blanchette, leader of the Bloc Québécois, as well as addresses a request from the Trudeau Foundation. The Auditor General, as you'll see in this letter, which is available in either official language, is not convinced that a review by her office is appropriate. You can read the letter. I'm not going to try to redact it here. So, Mr. Desjardins, could I turn things over to you to just address the motion that you presented here, and we'll see where we go from there. You might want to read it, I know it's short, just so members can consider it in light of this letter from the Auditor General.
So I'm just looking for it now. Okay,
I should have
the one. Sorry,
would you like me to read it?
I have it here.
Oh, good. Okay.
Just the one that was sent by the clerk that has both official languages, and so I'd like to read it in relation to, of course, our discussion last week, Mr. Chair, if that's all right with you. That
Are you going to read the motion or the letter?
Sorry, the motion.
Go for it. Yeah.
That the committee calls on the Auditor General of Canada and the Canada Revenue Agency to investigate the Pierre Elliott Trudeau Foundation, and that the committee believes it is in the public interest to prioritize this investigation.
So I got Madame Saint-Claude-Desgagnés, you have the floor.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to suggest an amendment to this motion in the light of the answer from the OAG rather. Made by our honorable leader, Mr. Blanchet, and the communications person. I would like to withdraw this motion to that the committee call on the Canadian agency, inquire as to the Canadian Revenue Agency, and give priority to this investigation.
Or as the proposed amendment to Mr. Desjardins' motion, that the committee calls on the Canada Revenue Agency to investigate the Pierre Trudeau Foundation, that the committee believes it is in the public interest to prioritize this investigation. Is there a discussion around this? First to Mr. Desjardins, then I'll go to Mr. Genuis. Go ahead, Mr. Desjardins.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and just thanks to the committee members. I know this is a discussion that we've been trying to have since last week, and I want to thank Mr. Genuis for tabling the original motion to allow us to begin this important discussion. It's no secret that what we're seeing and what's happening with the Pierre Trudeau Foundation, given that it's a foundation that is supported by public funds, that it's important that, given what the events have transpired with the Pierre Trudeau Foundation, that it is in the public interest to see an investigation into the finances, the donations, and in particular, any possible misdealings that the organization may have. It's important, I think, that the Canada Revenue Agency do this work because they're, of course, an agency that has, one, the capacity, tools, but also a mandate to review aspects of this work that maybe this committee in some aspects wouldn't be able to. But I do believe that given the amendment that was just noted by my colleague from the Bloc Québécois, that it is important to make more narrow the role of the CRA in this work, and I accept the amendments given the letter from the leader of the Bloc Québécois.
Thank you, Mr. Genuis.
Thank you. Before I make my comments, just a question of clarification for the clerk. The motion that is on the floor is the motion that was put on notice on April 18th in its entirety. Is that correct? Okay. And the amendment is to remove the phrase the Auditor General and. So it would just be the committee. Yeah. Okay. Excellent. So Conservatives are supportive of the amendment and the amended motion. I do want to underline our view that public hearings at committee are critical on this issue. It doesn't have to be as many hearings as we had originally proposed last week. We're open to reasonable compromises given the other various issues that the committee could be looking at. So we feel it is reasonable to ask the Canada Revenue Agency to undertake this investigation, although they will ultimately make that decision independently. We can't know for sure how they will respond to this request, but it's reasonable for us to make this request. And in the meantime, I think the role we have as parliamentarians for getting to the bottom of these kinds of issues should very much include a certain number of public hearings as well. So I do want to signal that that while we want to be collaborative and we support this motion, we will be moving another motion that we think gets to the heart of the issue, which is the need to have public hearings here in Parliament involving members of Parliament doing our job to get to the bottom of it, that we need to have those hearings as well. Thanks.
Mr. Fragaskatos.
Our side supports what Mr. Desjardins has put forward with the amendment from the Bloc. And I thank them both for being collaborative here.
Do I have approval then for the amendment from Madame Saint-Claude-Desgagnés? Just eyes all around. I'm seeing head nods. Yes, I'm seeing eyes. I'm going to call that passed. And then I'm going to ask for a recorded vote for the motion as amendment, which I will read that the committee calls on the Canada Revenue Agency to investigate the Pierre Trudeau Foundation. That the committee believes it is in the public interest to prioritize this investigation Puis en français, que le comité demande à l'Agence du revenu du Canada
that the committee calls on the Canada Revenue Agency to investigate the Pierre Elliott Trudeau Foundation, and the committee believes it is of public interest to prioritize this investigation. Can we put the question, Madam Clerk?
Mr. Garnett,
In favor.
Mr. Cram,
In favor.
Mr. Macaulay.
Yes.
Madame Sinclair Desgagnés,
Oui.
Monsieur Desjarlais,
Yes.
Miss Bradford,
In favor.
Mr. Fragiscatos,
Yes.
Miss Shanahan,
Yes.
Monsieur Drouin,
Oui.
Miss Yep,
Yes.
ten yeas pour, nays contre, 0.
Très bien. Thank you very much. I will send a note as the committee chair to the CRA informing them of this motion that was passed unanimously. Mr. Genuis, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Now, as foreshadowed, I would now like to move another motion that, given that the Pierre Elliott Trudeau Foundation received a $125 million taxpayer-funded payment in 2002, the committee hold 3 hearings into the situation at the Trudeau Foundation and report its findings to the House. So colleagues, will recall last Monday, I spoke a little bit about the importance of this investigation of the Trudeau Foundation. At the time, we presented a detailed motion that included specific suggested witness names and that called for a somewhat broader study than the one that we're proposing today. Debate was adjourned on that motion. I'm hopeful that this motion will find the favor of the committee, recognizing that there are competing priorities that different members have. I think 3 meetings provides us with a good opportunity to look at this issue while at the same time leaving space for other things, and we'll start the work of identifying what we can identify in the context of those public hearings. The background of this story, I think members and the public know generally, which is that as soon as Prime Minister Trudeau took office, the foundation that bears his name started receiving substantial amounts of new money in foreign donations. The foundation said they returned certain monies, and that turned out not to be true. They said they had returned certain monies, and that turned out not to be true. Subsequently, this provoked a kind of governance crisis in the board and mass resignation. And I think it's just important to add today, in light of some new revelations from La Presse, the Prime Minister has made claims about his relationship or lack of the relationship with the foundation that bears his name that have turned out not to be true. The Prime Minister has repeatedly told the House that he's had no connection, no involvement with the foundation in the last 10 years, despite the fact that he is listed as a member of the foundation in their latest annual report. In particular, La Presse identified that 6 months into his premiership, there was a meeting, an event hosted by the Trudeau Foundation that happened in the office of the Prime Minister's own department. It was attended by the president of the Trudeau Foundation, and it was attended by 5 deputy ministers. So it seems not only the Chinese Communist Party, but also multiple senior members of the bureaucracy felt that it was in their interest to have a warm relationship with the Trudeau Foundation at a time when a Trudeau was also prime minister, and at a time when that foundation was also benefiting from significant amounts of foreign donations, and while the prime minister was still listed as a member of the foundation. So this poppycock about a firm wall between the prime minister's office and the Trudeau Foundation is needless to say hard to take. There's the Prime Minister's office and PCO are 2 separate buildings. there's a bridge between them. And I think that's maybe an apt metaphor for the relationship that that may have existed between the Trudeau Foundation, itself a public institution in statute. It's not a regular charity. It's a public institution in statute that has received massive injections of taxpayers' money. I think all of these facts suggest that the Prime Minister of Canada has been less than truthful in his explanation of events, and B, three public hearings at the Public Accounts Committee is the least we can do to try to help the public understand and get to the bottom of what took place. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Genuis. I was going to ask for any speakers on this. Mr. Fragaskatos, you have the floor.
Chair, I never doubt, of course, the sincerity of my colleague, but as someone who I think follows regularly the work of parliamentarians in committees, he will know that at ethics, there was a motion passed to bring to light, to bring to the fore, rather, what he's calling for. I think that we have a lot of work to do on this committee, work that we had already committed to, and the motion that we voted on at the outset of this meeting still allows us to live up to our responsibilities as parliamentarians by asking the Canada Revenue Agency to examine issues relating to the foundation. But I wouldn't want to see a situation where the work of another committee is also taken on here. Ethics is going to look at this. I think we need to move on and to work on the issues that we had already committed to as the Audit Committee of Parliament.
Thank you. I have a speakers list going here. Madame Saint-Claude-Gagné, vous avez la parole.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. With the letter received from the Auditor General, who presented very reasonable justification why she cannot get into the details beyond her mandate, with the events that occurred with the Pierre-Elliott Trudeau Foundation. Even if another committee is to be examining this issue, I think an extra set of eyes or several other sets of eyes would be useful and important. I'd also stress that if the motion we have just adopted, requesting CRA to conduct an audit, occurs in proper and due form, it'll still take a couple of months. And the public deserves to know more about the situation and the issues, and the public should have access to this detailed information that will be laid out before the committee in order to see what really occurred during or with the foundation, whether there were reimbursements or not, etc., and perhaps mismanagement of that foundation. Public deserves to know. We are the public representatives, and we should act.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. Precisely, I would like to thank the members of the Commission this morning for the motion that we have just adopted. And I think it is fair square, central to the preoccupations of the committee here. If other situations arise, inappropriate problems in the donations or in the management of the foundation, it's the revenue agency that has all the means at its availability to inquire and investigate. I am somewhat concerned that we do have a tendency here within the committee, which is relatively unique among committees. We work we are at arm's length of current situations. We should let the agencies do their work, or other committees as well, particularly the offices of the Auditor General and the Revenue Agency, to do their work. And we will review what they have done. They are going to be held accountable. They are responsible to reply to the questions that we put to them. We do not conduct investigations here within this committee, and with reason, because whether we like it or not, there are other committees who are more attuned with what these situations are, and they have a more probable mandate to examine these issues. So it's to maintain vigilance and prudence and calmness. We should wait and see what the results that the process provides. Otherwise, we'll find ourselves in a situation where we are conducting perhaps we would be faulty in meddling in other investigations that are ongoing by either the agency who had been tasked with conducting the inquiry. So I do not agree with this motion. I don't think it's any surprise to anyone, but I believe that we have to be careful. Otherwise, we may hinder the mandate of the Public Accounts Committee. Thank you, Madame.
Thank you, Chair. It is always inspiring to see the gymnastics that my colleagues across the way engage in to try to avoid accountability. I'm sure none of them are being intentionally misleading, but they may have received some faulty information. The Ethics Committee is not undertaking anything like a standalone study on what happened to the Trudeau Foundation. They are merely including from what I understand, 2 witnesses from the Trudeau Foundation to comment on their broader look at election interference. That is very different from what I think is required here, which is an investigation of what happened to the Trudeau Foundation. And no parliamentary committees do conduct investigations. They seek to answer important questions about public expenditure, the activities and responsibilities of government institutions, and if we're going to see another hour and a half gymnastics show from the government side, so be it. But I'm very proud to be supporting this motion, and I think it's appropriate. It fits squarely within the mandate of this committee and the work that is required to get to the bottom of what happened at the Trudeau Foundation.
Looking for speakers if there are any. Mr. Desjardins, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank my colleagues for another, I think, important motion. I think there's 3 principles for me that we should answer in this discussion today. One is, I do accept the principle that committees are masters of their own will, and in particular, issues that are most important to the members are most important to me, as a matter of fact, in terms of our collegiality. We just passed a motion that I think is a good one that calls on the CRA to conduct an investigation. However, I do take the point that the Bloc Québécois is making with regards to the lengthy amount of time that report would take, of course. And so I'm more partial to an independent investigation by the CRA for this kind of work, because it's dealing with, in particular, very detailed financial statements, I'm sure. And so I prefer the CRA to investigate that, and I'm sure all of you have agreed to that. However, the work that we would be conducting in these meetings would be, if I can understand more correctly, Mr. Genius, is that, or Genuous, is that it would be to see how these members, or at least the members that they agree to come here, would have some kind of knowledge of these donations in particular. Would that be the nature of the questions you think that we'd be asking, or to be more in relation to how they operate, similar to ethics, or like what would kind of be our objective here? Would it be to narrowly look at the 125 million taxpayer funded payments, or could we, you think, make that broader in some aspect, or just some clarity as to what we would be doing in this particular setting versus what the CRA would be doing?
Mr. Genuous.
Yeah, I'm happy to address that question. The motion was intentionally written in a way that gives members broad latitude to ask the questions that are on their mind. I think I think that's suggested by the reference to the $125 million payment. It's a given that it's context. But the substantive part of the motion is that the committee hold 3 hearings into the situation at the Trudeau Foundation and report its findings to the House. I think there are a lot of questions that need to be answered about, just sort of broadly speaking, the policy that underlines the relationship between this foundation and the government of Canada. It bears the Prime Minister's name. It held a meeting in the office of his department. It had this spike of all kinds of foreign donations, many of which it has retained. It is listed in statute as a government institution, but it's also a charity. So there are, I think, a lot of issues behind the structure and vulnerabilities that are associated with a foundation like this, and there are a broad range of questions that I think we can and should ask about the vulnerabilities around effective use of taxpayers' money, accountability, oversight, risks of foreign interference, what relationships do or do not exist between ministers, the Prime Minister, how the continuing power of appointment of members of the foundation that sits in the hands of the Minister of Industry, how that could be exercised or not. The kinds of conversations that do and don't happen between the Prime Minister and members of his family who sit on the board. One sibling sits on the board, one is a member. These are, I think, all different kinds of questions we could ask. I think there'll be a lot of ground to cover in 3 hearings, but I think members will have the latitude that they wish.
Yes, Mr. Desjardins.
Yeah, thanks to the member for that explanation. I think it is reasonable when you put it in those lights that we can have the opportunity to ask broader questions, and even for the government members, I think it could even shed some of it. It could be valuable for you as well. I think to maybe better highlight the work that the Trudeau Foundation actually does, because I think that's the question that many members here have, and the reasonings why this amount of taxpayer funded funding is there. The only concern I have is just because there's in my own mind, there's competing interests for how what items we debate here. In particular, we know that clean water on First Nations reserves is deplorable, and the reality is that we've recently heard that's gotten worse. That issue, it's gotten significantly worse, and so I'd hope that we can find a way to strike a balance between the existing studies that we should be doing and the things that we should be reviewing there, and the time that I would really hope that we can get, versus the amount of time that's allocated here. I'm not sure if the member would be open to amending the total amount of meetings that you think this could potentially have, to potentially 2 maybe, or 1 or 2, just to make it a little more lean, a little more lean for us, just because we don't have that much time before the summer. Maybe John, or sorry, Mr. Chair, maybe you can briefly talk about what our calendar looks like, because I'm curious as to how we can fit this in here, which does have bearing on whether or not I agree with the total amount of sitting.
Sure. I'll respond to that briefly, and then Mr. McCall, you're next on the speaker list. Look, we have a busy calendar, but we could make room for these meetings. I don't see our timeline as an obstacle. I'm not. My view is this committee has work to get done, but as issues emerge, the committee should decide what its priorities are. But I've allotted time on the calendar for the outstanding reports we need to look, as well as time to review the reports as they're produced by the team that supports this committee. So I'm comfortable that we're able to consider these additional dates and still be on track to continue to produce other reports that we're required to do. Mr. McCauley, you have the floor.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Mr. Desilets. And you bring up a very good point. I'll let Mr. Genuis speak about the amount of days for this study. But on the clean drinking water, we just recently received a progress report. And we've certainly seen over a lot of our time here, every AG report is a repeat of things that hadn't properly been addressed from past ones. So I think it would be perfect timing. Getting tiny bit off topic here, but I'd certainly support 1 or 2 days specifically around that progress report. So we're not sitting here or replacement MP sitting here 5 years from now saying,
I'm going to just,
nothing
Mr.
happened.
I'm just going to kind of pull you back into this motion. We'll happy to discuss additions to the other additions
I
to
am
the
done.
calendar, but I guess I'll just kind of raise relevance here. So, Mr. Desilets, do you want the floor back, or was that you had a proposal? I don't know if you want Mr. Genuis to ask, or if you want to make an amendment. I'll turn the floor back to you.
Well, sure. I just wanted to see I'm interested in voting in favor of this motion. The only concern I have is the length of days, because I'm just to put in reference the other studies that I'm hoping to have heard here, and Mr. McCauley mentioned one of them that we're trying to work together on and trying to get some clear answers on. So just in looking at the number, the nature of it and the request of it, I agree with. I think we should be bringing these folks in. Just would we have any flexibility on the amount of hearings? Like we can do 1 to 3, I'm saying, but maybe 1 or 2 perhaps. Like is there a critical loss if we don't bring them in for 3 days? Sure.
I'll let Mr. Genuis respond to that, and then I might have a comment. But go ahead, Mr. Genuis.
Yeah. So, I'm happy to reason together, to quote The Godfather. But three is already fewer hearings than I wanted. I mean, I could live with 2. I think 1 would be too few. Another way to maybe do this is to define, instead of a number of meetings, a number of hours of hearings. Because if we say a number of hours of hearings, we give the chair flexibility to either, if a witness is available, to have 1 hour and then something else happen in the same meeting. Another option would be if he's able to get an extra hour, and we can do 3 hours of hearings together. So maybe as a compromise, we can say that the committee hold 5 hours of hearings into the situation, which would add up to 2.5 normal meetings. What's so funny, guys? Okay. 4.5 hours. My initial motion had, I think, all of the witnesses we needed to hear from, which would have been substantially longer. And I feel like I've already come with a compromise, and you're asking me to meet halfway again when I've already gone 2/3 of the way. But anyways, Mr. Desilets, basically the way the votes will work on this committee, it comes down to you. I would strongly object to less than 2 hearings. And I think maybe if we define it by number of hours instead of number of meetings, we give ourselves and the chair more flexibility. I won't propose an amendment. I'll leave it to you to propose an amendment, Mr. Desilets. But in general terms, that would be the way I would see this.
So let me make a quick comment, Mr. Desilets, and I'll turn things over to you. That is one option, is to set a number of hours. Members are aware that Thursday we are able to extend our hours as necessary. It's kind of a perfect spot in the parliamentary calendar, because it's a low usage time. So if members prefer to set an hours, whether it's 5 or 6, I could endeavor to hold 2 meetings in that capacity. But I will look for your direction on that. And so, Mr. Desilets, you seem to have the decision here, whether it's number of meetings. It sounds like Ms. Genuis is willing to meet you at 2, or you can do hours. 4, 5, or 6. I'll turn it over to you, though.
Well, thank you very much. And thanks to my opposition colleagues for, I think, striking a good balance for the work that I'm interested in doing, and the other working first, of course, in trying to make sure that First Nations people are best represented. And so I think striking a balance at 2 meetings is reasonable. I know, Kelly, you mentioned 1 meeting, but if we're all amicable to 2, I prefer, 1 or 2 on this. I for sure want to have it happen, considering the comments made by Mr. Genuous on this. I'm in favor of voting for this. And so if we can maybe hear some comments from maybe the government members, the Liberal members, if they'd be amicable to 2 meetings, I think it's reasonable considering that he did start at 5. And I think 2 is fine. Honestly, I think we can get to the work that we need to do with 2 meetings. And so I'd be prepared to motion an amendment to Mr. Genuous's motion to move it to 2 hearings.
Thank you. So we have an amendment on the floor. Mr. Fragaskatos, you have the floor, and that amendment is to move it from 3 meetings to 2 meetings. À 3 réunions. There, Mr. Fragaskatos.
Chair, can I ask that we suspend the meeting for just a few minutes to consider this?
Sure. Would 3 minutes be enough?
Uh,
5? Okay, 5.
I'd say 5.
Yes.
5 hours. How about that? Yeah.
I will suspend for 5 minutes. Mr. Fragaskatos, you have the floor.
I understand that based on conversations that we've had across the aisle, that there is agreement, Mr. Chair, on 2 meetings. Elected officials would not be invited. Family members would not be invited. And in order to ensure that we are doing what we need to do at public accounts and focusing on the issues tasked of us, we're not going to get into an extended discussion on witnesses at this meeting. That can be taken up at the subcommittee level. I'm looking at my colleagues, but I see nodding.
Okay, and on your second point, what witnesses, I completely agree with you on that. As for the first 2, I'm going to let the members speak to that. But Mr. Genuis, do you have comments? I saw your hand go up.
Yeah. So Chair, I think again in the spirit of compromise and from my firm conviction that these committee hearings need to happen, we are going to do 2 committee hearings regarding the Trudeau Foundation, and at those 2 meetings, we will not be inviting elected officials or members of the Trudeau family. My personal view is that there are some questions that need to be answered by those folks, but I also understand just the reality of the fact that you know, we've got to come to an understanding here in order to allow these hearings to proceed. And I think with the caveat. And the specific witness list should be discussed at the subcommittee, with the caveat that that given those exclusions, we would certainly like to be able to hear from everybody else that's important and not have any other exclusions. And I'm confident that the subcommittee can work in good faith to ensure that we are able to hear from the leadership of the Trudeau Foundation and get to the bottom of this in those get as far as we can in 2 meetings, given those exclusions.
Very good. Pardon me, Mr. Desjardins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I just want to thank my colleagues. I do believe that we have an agreeable motion and an amendment, and if members are prepared, I think we can go to a vote.
I'm sure the clerk's pulling his hair out because we've got amendments to motions, several. So I'm going to try to unravel this. So first, can I get a vote on? I'm going to try to do. Well, I'm taking Mr. Fragaskato's remarks as an additional, I guess, sub-amendment. But I was going to begin with Mr. Desjardins before I deal with Mr.
Just point of order, Chair. Can we just not proceed and have the minutes reflect the fact that there was an agreement that was made?
Well, I have a clerk. I like to manage his, so so we're in order here. So first, can we get a vote? We just 1 second.
Right. Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to wrap all this up, and we're just going to have a single vote on it. So, the motion will read that given that the Pierre Elliott Trudeau Foundation received a $125 million taxpayer-funded payment in 2022, the committee hold 2 hearings into the situation of the Trudeau Foundation and report its findings to the House. Witnesses will not include any elected officials or family members. What did I say?
2022.
I meant 2002, of course. I misspoke. Thank you. Saba, could I let's have a let's. Okay, pardon me. Yes, or Trudeau family members. I'll read it again. Or that given, I'm hoping the clerk will take notes so I don't rewrite what I've said. That given that the Pierre Elliott Trudeau Foundation received a $125 million taxpayer-funded payment in 2002, the committee hold 2 hearings into the situation of the Trudeau Foundation and report its findings to the House. Witnesses will not include any elected members or Trudeau family members. And I'm going to call a recorded vote on this, even though I think there's agreement.
Anytime you want.
Clerk, if you could call that roll call, please.
Mr. Jenness,
Yes.
Mr. Cram,
In favor?
Mr. McCauley. Yes. Madame Sinclair de Gagné,
Oui.
Mr. Desjardins,
Yes.
Miss Bradford,
Yes.
Mr. Fragiscatos,
Yes.
Miss Shanahan,
Oui.
Monsieur Drouin. Oui. Miss Yip,
Yes.
10 yeas, contre nays, 0.
Well, thank you very, very much. Unless there are any comments members want to make, I'm going to suspend the meeting in 1 second. I'll recognize you in a second, Mr. Desjardins, and then we will turn to a line by line of one of the reports that we have scheduled to report back to the House. Mr. Desjardins, you have the floor.
It was mentioned in our last discussion on the motion, the importance of the progress report on First Nations water issues. And I'm not going to table the motion today, but just want to give members that a bit of a heads up that I've consulted some of my colleagues here, and I think that I'll be tabling a motion to that effect in relation to the amount of meetings to review the progress report on the First Nations water issues, likely this week or next week. And if any members, of course, have any input on that, I'd be happy to hear their input prior to the tabling of that motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Desjardins. Could I ask you, this is all very timely. We're going to have a subcommittee meeting scheduled for this Thursday. So if you could table that motion between now and then to give us an indication of what you're thinking, that'd be very, very helpful for our planning. That way I can consider it along with today's motion and future business. So with that, I want to thank all committee members for their collaborative work, and I will suspend just for 5 minutes, you reckon? For 5 minutes, just so we can go in camera. So I'll be back with you all soon. Ms. Bradford, I suspect you'll need to log off and then log back in on a in-camera channel. Okay. Thank you. We're suspended.